On the night of March 22nd, 2026, a real tragedy unfolded on the tarmac at New York's LaGuardia Airport. Now, in the hours and days that followed, information, and of course, misinformation, spread like wildfire. So, our goal here is to cut through all that noise. We're going to provide a clear, factual summary of what we know, based on official records, flight data, and the actual air traffic control audio. Let's break down exactly what happened.
So let's set the scene. The when and where are absolutely critical to understanding this incident. It was late on a Sunday night, conditions were rainy, and it all happened at one of the busiest airports in the entire United States.
Okay, so these are the undisputed tragic facts. Air Canada Express Flight 8646, which was operated by Jazz Aviation, collided with a firefighting vehicle as it was landing. The collision tragically resulted in the deaths of both the pilot and the co-pilot, and it sent 41 other people to the hospital. To understand how something like this could possibly happen, we need to look at how two very different missions ended up in the very same place at the very same time.
To really get what went wrong, you have to understand that two completely separate stories were unfolding at the exact same time. It was a collision course, and it was set in motion by two separate emergencies. So on one side, you've got Flight 8646. It's a Bombardier CRJ-900 on a totally routine flight from Montreal, just finishing up its landing. And then on the other side, you have ARF Truck 1, a Port Authority firefighting vehicle, out on the airfield with its own urgent mission. And this is so important to understand. The fire truck wasn't just randomly on the move. It was actually responding to a call from a United Airlines flight that had reported an odor in the cabin, which, can be a potentially serious situation. That meant the truck's crew was under a lot of pressure to get to that other aircraft as fast as they possibly could.
Okay, so now we have to look at how these two paths crossed. The whole tragedy, really, it boils down to a breakdown in communication that happened over just a matter of seconds.
Before we get into the actual audio, we need to know this term, a runway incursion. It sounds technical, but it's pretty simple. It means an aircraft, a vehicle, or a person is on a runway where they absolutely should not be. And that is precisely what happened here. When you piece this timeline together from the ATC audio and flight data, it is just chilling. It shows a totally routine clearance, then a sudden moment of realization, followed by a critical mistake, and then a desperate last-second correction that just came too late. It all started with this, a completely standard professional request from the fire truck. They were following procedure, just asking for permission to cross the active runway. And this was the reply. The controller gave the clearance. That one instruction officially set the fire truck and the landing jet on a direct collision course. And right here, this is the most critical error. Realizing a vehicle was on the runway with a landing plane, the controller's first panicked instruction went to the wrong aircraft, Frontier 4195, which was just taxiing nearby. This case of mistaken identity was just catastrophic. Every fraction of a second was vital to preventing this collision, and those precious seconds were wasted talking to the wrong crew. You can hear the absolute panic in the controller's voice in the actual audio recording. By the time the correct vehicle, Truck 1, was finally addressed, the command was just a desperate, repeated shout, but it was already too late. Now, this number really highlights the forces we're talking about. 24 miles per hour might not sound very fast, right? But for a multi-ton aircraft, the momentum is just immense. The impact was devastating, and it completely obliterated the cockpit of the CRJ-900. So those few seconds of confusion were followed by hours and hours of chaos. Let's take a look at the immediate aftermath on the tarmac at LaGuardia. The system kicked into emergency mode right away. The runway was closed, the FAA stopped all flights, planes had to divert to other airports, and the NTSB, the main agency that investigates these kinds of accidents, sent a team to the site immediately. This was the controller's somber confirmation over the radio. You can hear that the panic in his voice is gone, and it's just been replaced by this grim reality, acknowledging the collision and signaling the start of the massive emergency response. So the big question for investigators is not just what happened, but how it was even possible. And this shifts the focus from the event itself to the system that allowed it to happen in the first place.
To understand a really key factor here, we need to quickly look at how air traffic control is set up. You got tower control, which handles planes on the active runways, takeoffs and landings. Then you have ground control, which handles everything else moving around on the surface. These are two very distinct high-pressure jobs, and they're kept separate for a reason, to prevent information overload and to keep everyone focused. Well, according to multiple reports, there was just one controller on duty at the time of the incident, and they were handling both of those critical jobs simultaneously. So think about that. They were juggling the landing Air Canada jet, the taxiing Frontier jet, the emergency with United flight, and the fire truck's movement, all at once.
In just this unbelievably raw and heartbreaking moment, captured live on the frequency, the controller gave a candid, immediate admission of fault. In a conversation with the Frontier pilot who saw the whole thing, he acknowledged the immense pressure and his error.
And this just poignantly shows the kind of professional empathy you find in the aviation world. The response from the Frontier pilot wasn't blame. It was understanding. It was one professional recognizing that another was in an impossibly difficult situation.
And this really brings us to the ultimate question, the one the NTSB will have to answer. Was this tragedy the mistake of one person? Or was it an inevitable failure of a system that put one person in a position where they had to make multiple life-or-death decisions all at the same time? As the investigation continues, it's so important to remember the human cost of all of this. Our thoughts are with the families of the pilots who were lost, and we're wishing a full recovery to all the survivors and the first responders who were affected by this tragic night at LaGuardia.